So how did that? I don't know how that happened.
You're good now.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. So tonight I'm just going to talk with you guys, share my experience with burnout, how I've actually battled it, and can't say I've conquered it, and I'll tell you why, but I've actually maintained a good understanding as to what it is and how to keep it from happening to me all over again. So before I can go into all that, I kind of really want to kind of chat with you guys and share my kind of a definition of what burnout is. I kind of see it a little bit like a disease, I guess. I'm sure if you guys haven't experienced it, you probably will, but it's the type of thing that just kind of sits inside you, and if you don't tame it, it just wants to just kind of show up, I think. And it doesn't really discriminate. So, as a designer, whether you're young, seasoned, everybody kind of goes through this and gets burnout. It doesn't care about your titles. It's just part of the, I guess, the design ecosystem. So I see it as almost a challenge, like amongst all the other challenges that we have as designers and developers and project managers, is to kind of keep this thing called burnout at bay. So, because if it's not dealt with correctly, I guess if there's a correct way to deal with it, it can affect you, and it can affect your designs. It can affect the way you go about your career, and that's kind of my definition based around my experience of it. And that's what I want to talk about first, is my own experience with burnout. Now, my slides are pretty straightforward because I like to talk, and I feel like if I just share repeat what you see on my slide, it's not as effective. So my experience with burnout started, I guess, way back in college, but it ended to about a year and a half ago. In college, as a senior, I was lucky enough to have a kind of a one-to-one, not one-to-one, but a group video conference with Milton Glaser. And if you guys are familiar with Milton Glaser, if you're not, he's a legendary designer. He's created the I Love New York logo. That's one of his bigger projects amongst others. But during this whole discussion with Milton, he shared his story of design and what to expect when you graduate and all these things that really kind of resonated with me, but not as much as the fact that at the time Milton was like 70 years old, and still designing. And I think now he's like 80s or maybe even 90s, whether he's still designing today or not. But to just sit there and listen to this legendary designer who was still enthusiastic about his career at 70-something years old, really kind of hit home to me, to the point where I remember looking at my wife, then girlfriend Julie, and literally telling her that I'm going to design my whole life. Like, why would I ever retire? Like, I'm going to be like Milton. I'm going to just design. I was super motivated by this idea of just making design kind of part of your life and it not being a job. So as a student, I was super excited when I would do logos and posters, and if you've been to art school, it's all fun, But when I left college and I went to my first job, I carried that excitement over with me. I was like, all right, my first real job out of school, and I'm gonna get super pumped, and I'm gonna work on really great brands. My first project was with the NFL, and I get there, and I'm like I said, excited, and it was my first step to all right, now I'm here. Now I can get my career on the right path and just set sail to design into my 70s. Well, during that time there, great agency, did a lot of great work. I started to notice that not everybody was happy as I was. I was really amped up to be designing. I've got a job, my first job. Why isn't everybody happy? They enjoyed their jobs, but it just felt like a job. Well, again, I was naive in that sense that I was like, well, maybe it's just part of, having the day-to-day, life is life. Well, things kind of continued along, and I started Greenline Creative, and when I made that transition, it again, I was excited to now start an agency and design and have my own clients, you know. So you go through this like process in your head, and I was really motivated. And until about 2 years ago, like 2 years ago, everything really changed. Like it was such a weird moment because at the time we had a lot of great work, a lot of great clients. We were doing a lot of great things. We still do, but this was more on this fast pace, you know, hiring freelancers, considering hiring employees. Like we were doing it, you know, everything I envisioned was coming to life. But for some reason I was like super miserable. I literally started getting kind of disgruntled. That's kind of a harsh word, but clients became these things in my life. I became so unmotivated to design. I started to not really care for the design industry, and those in the design industry. It was just this world of like, God, we are always competing with each other and all these trends, and gosh, what are we doing, you know? I just became very bothered by who I was, and that bled into my life. Like, so as a you know, the co-founder of Greenline Creative, I mean, it's my job to bring in work and do great work and sell clients, to the point where I didn't even want to do that. I mean, I would go do presentations and proposals, and I almost started making excuses for my lack of being able to really come to the table and really, you know, sell work. And it even got worse when I started to feel like I had a dread going to work. Getting up in the morning was like, it had to kick me to get out of bed, and then it had to kick me even harder to go to work on Monday. Like, and at the time I didn't really know what it was, you know. I just felt like, man, I'm just tired, you know. But looking back, I realized like it was a severe case of burnout, to the point where I even contemplated not designing anymore and just wanting to be a barista at a Starbucks or something, like completely something so distant from for design. So there's a lot of details around that, and I'm happy to share all that. But that's kind of my overview experience with being burnout, and it did affect a lot of things. And if you've ever experienced it, you kind of know that feeling. But the big thing is, how did I cure it? Who am I today? So today I feel more excited about being a designer in the industry than I ever have. Like, even when I was in college, like I have a burning desire now to actually help designers, and I love the idea of great design. And I think it's all because of some of the things that I'm going to share with you tonight, is that I've learned to tame this thing called burnout, you know, because it used to drive me. It used to make my decisions kind of for me, you know, like getting out of bed and some of those things that I talked about, you know, like, oh, choosing the right clients. Like, it was all based around this idea of like, well, do I even want to work on that type of project or not? Well, now it's just like the world's out there, and I'm going to go get it in a much more systematic way. So some of the things that I did to kind of high level, like to cure this burnout right now, was the biggest thing is I just stopped trying too hard, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, sometimes you can try so hard to be great at everything and do everything so perfectly that you really just obsess over to the point where you do nothing. You know, you just kind of put yourself in this box of, you know, perfection, and nobody's perfect. And, you know, clients have faults, we have faults with clients, but when you accept the fact that you're not perfect, you can kind of move past some things. I also took a break from design. I started to focus a little bit more on the things that mattered to me. When I say design, it's almost just like the industry as a whole. You know, I stopped trying to follow so many blogs and feeds around designers and what they're doing, because it just started to affect me and how I felt about myself. Began to delegate out tasks, launched a side project that was completely distant from the design industry altogether, even though that's not, if you know anything about starting side projects, it's not always the best thing to do, but you know, it gave me an outlet. So today, you know, I've learned how to deal with it, and I feel like I'm a better person and a better designer for doing it. So that's kind of the high level piece. Now let's go into these a little bit more. So what can you do to help with this disease or whatever you call burnout. And that's what we're here today to do, kind of share with you in detail things that I've done that in the last 2 years I've started to integrate into my life, and that I know for a fact if you do some of these, you don't have to do all of them. It's like the workout plan. Like, you don't get up and say, I'm going to lose 30 pounds tomorrow. Like, it's just impossible. But you work at it. You focus on a couple pounds every day. And that's kind of what this is about. So there's 10 little pieces that I've found has helped me conquer this and keep it at bay. So I'm focused on doing great work and being a better designer, not so much, sitting here wondering when burnout's going to hit me. So the first thing is diversify your projects. Some of these are it's probably hard for some if you work in an agency. Sometimes you kind of get stuck on the same projects. If you're a freelancer, you're taking on the same type of projects. You get stuck, and you're constantly doing the same thing over and over. And the easiest way to become burnout is having a routine that is kind of, it turns into this chore, So to ensure that you can stay fresh, try to really diversify what you're working on. And that doesn't mean just like the types of design projects you're doing, but tasks even. Like at the time of like my early burnout, I was doing so much like proposal work that I was just like, and all that stuff kind of builds up. But so if you work in an agency, ask if you can jump onto another team. Like a lot of times, if you have the right connections, I guess you could say, and you have a good relationship with your creative director or your project managers, they sometimes will swap you around a little to keep you fresh. Their goal isn't to make you miserable. Their goal is to really try to make sure that everybody's producing the best work possible. So there is an option, even if you kind of have a job that kind of has you cut out. If you're a freelancer, that's much easier to kind of control what you're working on, but that's just a matter of like looking at your client base and maybe deciding it's time to eliminate some of those maintenance projects and go after something that's a little more fresh and exciting. So that's one way you can kind of, to keep in mind, one tip, I guess, to consider when you're trying to keep burnout at bay. The other thing would be, number 2, I guess, is varying up your work environment. This one's pretty easy. A lot of people pretty much probably do this on a regular basis. If not, you should. But if you look at the same 4 walls every single day or the same point of view in your office, it really does get old. If you have the ability to get out of your house, whether that's just like for an hour at a coffee shop or to do some work from home or whatever it may be, consider doing it. One, you're going to be surrounded by a different environment. There's a lot of activity and actions that happen at a Mission Coffee is a great place to kind of get inspired. And then if you don't have the luxury to, get out of your house, consider just changing your desk up a little, like rotating it. If you're looking at that corner of the room, it could be a little bit more exciting than that corner of the room after a while. So little things that you can do, like plants. Like I actually love plants now because someone I worked with is a big advocate of plants. So I get a plant, and I've got 3 of them now, and I just keep them watered, and it's kind of fun to like kind of change up my day. So throw a plant out, get a new plant, whatever it may be. So varying up your environment. Number 3 would be take more time off. We're all guilty of this. I know I am, and I was probably more so than I am today. But we all have this routine that sometimes it's really hard to take time off. Like there's almost a guiltiness that you get inside by requesting days off. But really, it's the only way to stay fresh and keep burnout kind of in control. So like on average, like designers work 54 hours a week, which is a crap ton of work, and most of that is sitting in front of a computer doing this all day. So you kind of need that moment to step away. So by taking those vacations, and they don't have to be like this, vacation doesn't have to be this milestone that you look up to every year or every 6 months. It can be something that you just build into your routine. So like instead of one big long vacation, taking a day off, a Friday, and kind of extending your weekend can help a lot with, making you kind of recharging yourself and getting you back out there and motivated for the next week. I mean, a lot of companies only work 4 days a week because of the added benefit that they get out of their employees by giving them that 3-day weekend to actually do what they feel they want to do on that Friday. So take more time off. Even if you're a freelancer, I used to feel like, oh, I got to be focused in my business. But as I learned, you have to be working on your business, not in it for it to be successful. So, me taking time off now, I know I'm actually doing better for my clients than I was if I was sitting there drained out, trying to crank out my best work. So number 4 is do more of what inspires you. If design inspires you, great, but do design in a way that it's what you want to do. Like focus on something that inspires you of design. Like a lot of times we have jobs that are, I shouldn't say jobs, but we're in positions that, you may be working on one aspect. It may not be exactly what excites you. Like I love working on logos, but a lot of my work isn't logos, so every now and then I'll just kind of work on my own personal brands every now and then. So, but even if it's not design, even better. Like in my case, it was songwriting. I really enjoy the songwriting industry, and I play a little bit with music. So this was a moment that I took to really immerse myself in it, because what happens is you kind of miss not designing, and when you miss something, you come back even more excited about it. So I'm not saying you take like a ton of time off like I did, which was not a ton of time, but you step away and you just keep that, that thing that inspires you, kind of in your little domain. You protect it. I know a creative director who was a fine artist more so than he was even a designer. Like he would do anything to just sit there and paint all day, but design was just his thing that he did. It was another medium. So that's another good example. If you like to paint more. It will affect your design. So another thing where probably a lot of us are guilty of is not getting enough sleep. I used to trick myself to thinking that I did the best work at 2 in the morning. I used to literally sit there and go, yeah, I actually work better at 2 in the morning, like no distractions. But the truth is, like, I don't even know how that's even possible. Like I was horrible. I was really bad the next day. I was in a cloud. And how could I even be motivated at 2 in the morning? I mean, sleep I've learned through, things I've read, which is the most important thing you can do if you want to be good at something. Like, there's an infographic going around that has like LeBron James, a number of like really, great athletes. And one of the things that they do, and they build it into their day, is like sleep more. Like it is part of their training. Like LeBron, I think it was him who said on a day of a really big game, he literally takes 3 naps. Like it just refreshes your body, it clears your mind, and it keeps you in focus. So I don't know how I was literally thinking I was doing the best work at 2 in the morning. And because the thing is, you can't rationalize things, I guess. Like the next day, things are you're just focused on this cloud. But when you're really tired, you get sick, but you can't rationalize like why things are happening. So, and as a designer, we always kind of have to be focused on that. Why, if we make this decision, well, how's it going to affect something down the line? Another piece that I didn't focus on that I encourage everybody to is eating well and exercising. I'm trying to eat better. I like burgers. I like fries. I like bad food. But the biggest thing is exercise. I don't go to the gym. I'm not a gym guy, but I do run. Running has been probably the single piece that I could say out of all these things, the single reason that I have beat burnout or contained it, I guess, and I feel much better about myself. Like, to give you an example, like this presentation, my personal brand, the book, the blog, all the marketing initiatives that have come out of Frettie and has all been dreamt up while on a jog. And I don't run intensely. I jog maybe 2 miles, 3 miles if I'm like, hey, I worked hard today. But just stepping away from everything and slowing your life down and getting into a zone really does impact your ideas. Like, it sounds weird, but you'll be running and then everything just starts clicking. And obviously you feel better about yourself because the endorphins are firing, but it really has helped me break through some of those struggles and those ruts that I may have faced as a designer, whether it's like, oh, thinking about a concept, or, writing a blog, what should the next topic be, or, I feel like I'm much more ahead of myself than if I wasn't running. It also helps burn off that extra anxiety and stress. Like, I kind of think of it like a dog. If you keep a dog up too long, they just get really anxious. And I found, like, when you run, you just kind of release yourself, and all that stress and stuff just kind of goes away from the day. So that's probably a big thing to consider doing if you're not already. I talked a little bit about side projects, but if you can invest some time in a side project, it doesn't have to be a big website. It could be, if you're, like I said, if you like painting, consider making that a little bit more of a side project hobby. I mean, with Etsy, there's so many ways you can kind of turn things into marketplaces, but invest time in something else. And the reason why I feel that's important is that the hardest thing as a designer is when you don't have control over certain things. The client may say, well, we want to just all of a sudden change this copy, and it just affects everything, and you can fight it as much as you want, but the change is there, and the promise has been made, so you deliver on it. But as those decisions pile up, you start to feel like you have no ownership in anything, and your idea is now this art-directed mess that was kind of presented back to you, and you're trying to still process how it even got this far. So when you have your own side project, you not only learn a lot about yourself, you kind of transition from just being a tool more into strategy, and which is where the true value in being a designer is. But you also start making a little extra money if you're lucky, and which is always great. I mean, having extra money always goes a long way. But you also start to have that control again. So like when you have something that you can escape to, you can then rationalize why those decisions that during the day don't mean as much when you can go home and kind of do your best work on your own project. Number 8, similar to like vacation, is stepping away from your desk. I used to be a smoker, two packs a day. 2 years of not doing that anymore, but what I loved about smoking was the fact that I get away from my desk every hour. Getting away from my desk, I could separate my struggles in front of my computer, and for some reason, I used to think, oh, it's a cigarette, ooh, much smarter. But it's really that separation from your work, and in that more of a clear mindset to, talk through ideas with a team member or whatever it may be. So what I do today is in the morning, I like to at least get a quick walk in, and I'm not talking miles, a quick 30-minute walk if you can. Even a 10-minute walk would go far. And then towards the end of the day, around 3:30, I make it a point to step away and away from my desk and walk a little. So a lot of the same things happen, like if you run, happen when you walk. It's just things slow down. You can you don't feel like you're just chugging away at your desk all day. It breaks up the day as well. So number 9 is probably another really big thing that I've learned, is to not sweat the small things. Just like I was saying, it's so hard. There's expectations to, you're the designer. You're supposed to do the best work possible, and you better have a great idea, all the time. That's just not always possible, and all the budgets, all the expectations that kind of weigh on you really start to affect you. But what I've realized is that all that does is give you stress and start to shut you down. So like if I worry really too much about like a client request of like, well, I want to use our old logo, even though it's not perfect for the scenario, I understand why, and I have to accept that, but I don't sweat that stuff anymore. I used to be so concerned with, my portfolio to the point that I micromanage every little feedback, every little bit of feedback that comes through a client. But what it really did was just made me, I was like holding on so tight to everything that it just stressed me out. So if you do feel like you're getting stressed, like literally take a step back and like look across the big picture, like understand maybe why that decision has to be made from a budget standpoint, because oftentimes there's a bigger reason than just they want to use their old logo. and it doesn't look as good. But and then go even further and look back on your career. Like I did that, try to do that fairly regularly now. But once you stop and you go and you start looking back at how far you've come and all the work you've done, the little things don't matter as much. Like you start to appreciate the fact that like in my case, that I've been able to work on the brands that I have, or work on that many websites, or connect with those many people, that the tiny change just really doesn't matter too much to the big picture, I guess. And I think that just kind of comes through with time and experience, but I think that's probably one of the biggest things. Number 10, which is kind of the last piece, and you're all here, so obviously you see value in attending networking events, but really make that a big piece of your education and part of your year. Like I try to do 1 to 2 like small conferences a year, and then like small little like meetups throughout, every couple months. And the thing is that it's not a lot of time. I mean, the presentations are great, but the biggest thing that I get out of attending a networking event is the being surrounded by so much inspiration, so many talented people that you can share your stories, good and bad, kind of like clear your mind. If you can take a road trip with a bunch of people, like that's what we did when we went over to Rebuild in Indy. That was a great way to just kind of reflect on everything. You're like in a car for 3 hours or so, and you're just pumped up. You're just talking design. So if you can do that, you're much more motivated to continue. You come out of that with a motivation. If you can time those like every 6 months, it's almost like a big like motivational boost that you get out of coming back from those conferences. So those are the 10 kind of high level things to think about. But the key really to battling burnout that I have found, and this is going to sound weird, and it's the type of answer you're probably expecting, but it is really to keep it from happening. And that's like, there's really not a one size fits all. Like what works for me probably and may not work for you, but I do think those are like 10 things that you can adapt in some way. If it's severe, like in my case, like when I say I was designing for an agency, I just kind of like separated, okay, like I can no longer just kind of run the day-to-day of a business right now. Like my mind's not there. I'm not doing any good for myself, my career, or anything. So I actually took a job where I just focused on design, just pure UX design. Because if you ever run your own business, there's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of pressure and stress there. But that gave me a moment to not have to worry so much about where's my money coming from, which is a concern sometimes, So there's all these things that kind of build up, So if you can keep some of these things in your pocket, you can kind of prevent things from happening. So if it's severe, look across your life and say, am I in the right place? Like, am I really truly doing what I really know I can do? And some things you can't fix in a company, some things it's just built into culture. But you can do these little things that I talked about, like I was saying, an example would be, instead of waiting to reward yourself with one big vacation, make sure you build some of that vacation time into your weeks. The other thing to kind of keep things from happening, that I do every Friday, mostly every Friday, is clean off my desk, clean off my desktop, look back on my week, be proud of what I've accomplished. And that's something you could do tomorrow as you move into the weekend. And then just reflect, and plan how are you going to tackle the next week. Like every day, when you're in the right mindset, every day is another day to do great work. Like, and great work is defined differently, by everybody. And that's why it's important to be yourself. Stop trying to be the designer you may not be. Not everybody is meant to do certain things. Just because, if you look at Dribble, it's a great community of great talent. But if I always inspired to be the best thing on Dribble, that's a very narrow mindset when I have so many other things that I can do in my life and help so many other people that doesn't revolve around that. So that's kind of everything in a nutshell. I'm coming down to the actual end of that the 30 minutes or so. But I do better with questions. So I do want to kind of open that up. I mean, you guys, I'm an open book. You can ask me more details about my time as Burnout, and I can elaborate more on other things. So I guess at this time it's just more about questions. So if anybody has anything. Yeah.
So I'm not a designer, I'm a project manager. So my question is, what advice do you have for people who work with designers?
Good.
Recognize burnout and
yeah.
help designers.
Yeah. Thinking back on my career, I had 2 project managers that I would do anything for. Like an example is one of them. I drove down to Knoxville visiting Julie's family, and that we had to come in on the weekend and do some work for a large client. And I drove all the way back up to Columbus. Julie dropped me off at work, and I worked all the way till 5 in the morning. Not saying that's great, to do that often, but I didn't do it because I was told to do it. I did it because I respected why we were doing it. So like with a project manager and the relationship with a designer, designers can be a little hard to work with, I think, because we're both on as a project manager, you're in a kind of a tough spot, right? You're the middle person, right? So I would say just build that respect and just truly deep down appreciate what a designer is trying to do. I remember one of those project managers actually told me, that that I truly was making a difference in her day, like she could count on me, feeling like you're actually contributing to a bigger picture than just being told to make changes all day goes a long way. I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but just appreciate it, and they'll do a lot for you. So, and I guess the other piece would be to maybe just teach them, get them to understand a little more like why those decisions are being made versus just make this change. So and then they can see the big picture. But any other questions? Yeah.
It seemed to me that you have to manage your caseload, your client load, in order to fit in the time for stepping away and taking walks and taking runs and relaxing on the weekends.
Yeah. So the way that's good too, because another thing you learn is, you take every project that comes on your way, you're just giving so much to your business or that client that you're forgetting about yourself. So I like to tell myself that I'll do like four projects at a time, and that's spread out across a certain period of time because I have to protect myself. Like I have to protect that time. Like once you understand as a designer that your time really does contribute to something more than money, like quality of life, you can make that distinction whether that client A or B really is that important or not. So I have a really pretty strict schedule on myself around how do I work, these walks in and my time, just because I've got to respect that more so than, not more so than a client, but I'm only going to protect myself, I guess. So, any other questions?
You listen to music when you run?
I do. I just use the Nike Plus app, and it's just whatever's on my phone, but I think I have a mixture of things. It's kind of funny, but this is really exposing a lot. But there's that song that just kind of motivates you, right? So like, I don't know what it is, but if I have audio on and I'm designing, I can't even say it. But if I put like, I can't say it. It's hard to say it. It just really gets me in the mode. I get moving on stuff. So.
Yeah, I'm really curious.
I don't know. No, I can't. I'll tell you. I just can't now. No, sorry.
Can you play it?
Yeah.
No, it's such a, I don't know. I do enjoy listening to Pink, I guess. It's fun. I mean, she's got some cool songs. So such a weird. Huh? Yeah, I don't know. I just get moving. So, any other questions? Yeah.
Can you talk about how burnout's actually
good? Good? I guess a good case of that would be if it did, and like in my case, it really allowed me to reflect on what I was doing wrong and let me reset as I say, kind of look back on the train and reset some things.
I guess I mean like burnout to the point where you leave the industry. Why not? Be good.
I guess it's a matter of asking, like, I guess that would be more like really burnout. That's a good.
Because I guess when as a designer, I'm a designer. So as a designer, you get frustrated with the industry.
Yeah.
Gatorade was one of our clients, and you're selling sugar water with dye in it to children. Or you're selling more Frito-Lay chips. At what point is it good to burn out and say, I can take my talent and do more elsewhere, as opposed to meditating through whatever to stay?
Yeah, and that's so you have to ask yourself if it really is what you want to do. And I think it all goes back to knowing, like, protecting yourself and knowing what's important to you. Like, design now used to be like my thing, like my life, and now I know that it's just one small portion of like everything I'm gonna do in my life. Like, it doesn't have to define me. So like as a designer, sometimes those projects, they kind of define you, you know. And I think that's just the way portfolios are. Like, you got to put your best work in it, and you're known for that one project. You're known if it's good or bad, you know. But if it's something that you feel is not, it goes against your beliefs, I mean, you don't have to design. I mean, it's that choice, you know. Burnout would allow you probably some clarity to like think about that, you know. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
I just wanted to know.
yeah, it's a good one. And you had a question?
Yeah, actually mine relates to hers as well, because I was wondering if you've ever had a client that you just realized it wasn't meshing and they just kind of don't get it.
Yeah.
And like, how do you?
Oh yeah, I used to take pride, and I love talking about these types of topics. But I used to take pride in having our very first client for 7 years. And then I think about how bad that is. Like, there's no pride, because what that means is they really don't get it. And you're making the sacrifices to make sure that they come to where you are. But the truth is, like, you grow as a designer, and you have to go after the things that are more of a fit. Like, everything evolves, you know. So like, going back to like, if it's a client that you really don't feel connected to, it's time to let them go. Like, we should have let that client go years ago, you know, to the point where it just got to the point where we were fighting nothing, you know, because they couldn't see the true value in it. If we made adjustments in certain things, it was just bad, you know. So the best thing you can do is, there's only so much education you can do around it, you know. They're either good or they're not, you know. So, any other questions? Yeah.
Take away the computer, the hat, the glasses, everything about you, what you like to do apart from design.
Apart from it?
Yeah. Nothing related to it.
The act of design, or?
No, nothing related to design.
Hanging out with people, talking, giving back in some form. That's probably why I feel like I'm enjoying myself so much now. So.
Why do you like to do that?
Because I don't think there's enough of it, I guess. You know, like, it's easy to get lost in the land of Twitter and digital, you know, content streams. But this interaction, sitting here helping, I look at each of you and I hope I could help each one of you. And I put myself out there. If you ever follow my blog, I literally try to answer every email and really try to help designers, because I feel like it's just, the more we can help each other, the better the industry will be. So.
I totally thought you were going somewhere else. You said take the hat away, the computer, whatever. I thought you were doing the doppelganger question. You ever seen Alvin and the Chipmunks? Does anyone have
No, but this is not like if you have to play Sabres.
Yeah. You're like, you look exactly like a guy who's the agent at Alvin and Chipmunks.
I'm sure I should flip that soon. Any other questions? Yeah.
I have a question. So, you said you're a co-owner of the Greenline Creative.
Uh-huh.
How do you guys start that business? Because it could be very upsetting at the beginning and overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Burnout people when you're starting a business, especially because you have so many things to do and it's all disorganized.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you guys manage to, I guess this might be like an entrepreneurship question, but how do you manage to stay focused and start your business?
Yeah, so starting it, you have to have a drive to start anything, like a deep burning desire. Like, and it can't be something that isn't in your true motivational needs, I guess. So like, I wouldn't have started Greenline Creative if I felt like I could do it better. You know, I think a lot of people start things because they feel like, oh, I could do that better. I could manage my clients better. Like, I set out another crazy story. I love the transparency. I really do. I quit that job I was telling you about for $5,000, which then turned into Greenline Creative. No context of what clients were going to happen after that. It was hard to make that decision, but I knew that I wanted to learn about what it means to grow an agency, build an agency, wear all the different hats, see what it really means to manage a client and kind of play the role of project manager. That kind of fueled me to make that decision. That kind of fueled me to understand truly how do I create proposals that actually aren't estimates, you know, that they see true value in it. So that internal drive made those early days a lot easier because I was eager to learn. If you stop learning, you're really doing a disservice to yourself because there's so much to learn from any experience, whether it's going through burnout, whether it's, you know, trying to figure out how do I handle my first proposal, and that fear. So that kind of drug me along, and staying focused is just kind of knowing what you want to offer and how you get there. So, but I could answer more of those too, like individual, if you have any. But any other questions? Yeah.
As a young designer, I feel like you wouldn't have as much freedom as you might need to pick the projects, kind of limit your time. You're really trying to make like a good impression when you first get in it, like the excitement you talked about. How do you, when you don't have the option to kind of pursue as many of those as you would like, how do you maintain the excitement that you have coming into these new jobs? Yeah,
I think with young designers, there's this expectation, and that's why I'm creating that book. There's this expectation that you have to have experience. Like you're always working for your like portfolio essentially, right? So you're constantly thinking about protecting your ideas, and your options are somewhat limited, you know. Don't worry so much about that, if that makes sense. Like, do what you do and do what you're good at. Like, I think it's really easy to try to be everything to everybody and offer. I'm the designer who can do websites, logos, you know, print pieces, and that looks great, and employees love that because you really save them a lot of having to hire a lot of people. But you're doing yourself a little bit of a disservice because you're not niche enough to where you can go and try to take up other opportunities that may just be specific. And actually, that's where the great projects come from. Like, if you say I do everything, you're just gonna. It's like most designers. It's like what is it, shrimping, where you just throw out a net and you kind of collect everything, but you get a lot of junk in the process. But if you actually were strategic about where you want to work, what you want to do, you can focus more on doing great work. Even if you're not getting paid entirely what you may be somewhere else, but you really do have the power to control this. It's about demand. Like, another story to me is I've never gotten a job through a resume, through cover letters, through the whole process, because I simply just put myself out there and I show my value in other ways. Like, and a lot of jobs and opportunities come my way. They come to me versus me having to hunt them out, which is always a better way. You're kind of staying in control a little bit. So control your destiny the most you can, the best you can, and you'll be able to control your time as well.
A lot of the symptoms that you described are kind of self-diagnosed. How do you recognize burnout in others?
I think negativity would be the first thing. Like, if you see a designer or somebody who's just like really negative and they're like really thinking about job changes and doing drastic things, because I think that's probably one of the bigger side effects, you know, is like you can't see past the tree for the forest, or however that saying goes. You're like, as a burnout designer, you're just like, I just hate my job, I hate this client, I hate all these things. If you see a lot of that negativity, you know, where they're putting a lot of self, I guess, kind of negativity in their work and stuff, it's probably a good sign that maybe they need a break, to maybe swap them on a team if you're a project manager, or just give them a little like pat on the back, you know. maybe take them out for lunch or something to really try to, or give them that break if they need it. I think as designers, we in the industry, we keep a lot of our emotions like pent up, because we feel like, if I say, and this goes back to that whole idea of faking it, or not faking it, but like not being true to who you are. I don't know if you guys know David Sherry, but he has a weekly gold, and he had a great little weekly post that he wrote about acting, and in the industry how you act a lot, because you kind of have to, you have to put on this like everything's great, I'm excited to work on this client, I'm excited to do this, I'm excited, but sometimes you may not be excited, and that's okay, because that's when people can look at you and kind of help you, like if you're really struggling like with a particular solution, like don't be afraid to say I don't have the answer, like I can't do it, we need to extend the team, or we need to bring somebody in who has maybe more experience or not. I mean, I'm not saying run from your fears, but recognize what you're really good at and be okay with not. So, anything else? I won't do that annoying thing of like, oh, you gotta have more questions, but I love questions. So.